Okay, if everything went well, we should be live. Usually wait for like 4 seconds to see if everything is good.
Waiting for my computer
But
to
yeah,
respond.
well, it didn't.
Good.
um, well, welcome everyone to another episode of Everything Outside Code. And if you've been following these, typically we come on every week or bi-weekly to talk to an amazing marketing expert, a founder, CEO. But basically, we just talk about the really hard parts of going to market. So if you build something cool and you want to go to market with it. Today we have the amazing Woody Selick here. Woody is a VP and also head of marketing. But Woody comes in with 25 plus years of experience building, scaling products. I think Woody, you mentioned you had an engineering background. We'll get to that in a bit, but
Yeah.
welcome to the show today, Woody.
Hello. Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me, William. I know we've been talking for a while and it's really excited for the opportunity just to have a conversation. So
Yeah,
thank you.
super. I'm sure we'll have a great conversation. If you're listening to this, if you have any comments or you have any questions, you want to chime in, just put them in the comments anywhere you're listening from, and we'll put them on shortly. Today we're going to be talking about developer marketing. We're going to be talking about how to grow and most importantly scale developer products. I think personally I've seen a lot of companies, especially now, build stuff. They want to go to market. They are able to do like some of the initial stuff, but then there's the really hard part of how'd you get to 10,000 users? How'd you get to a couple thousand signups each week? That's the really hard stuff. So that's some of what I want to talk about today. But first, let's throw it back, like really back, Woody. You could introduce yourself and tell us how you got here. Not how you got to the stream, obviously, but how you got to head of marketing.
Oh, I'll tell you how I got to the stream, but I'm going to go back a few years. So again, thank you for having me. Most recently I was working at Netlify. I was head of marketing at Netlify and was there for a few years. And then prior to that, I was working at Unity Technologies, so in the real-time 3D kind of space, but still very much working with developers and engineers. And right now I'm doing some consulting work, doing some advising work, trying to figure out what's next, and really excited about it. But yeah, going back a ways. So I actually started, my career when I was 14, and don't want to date myself, but it was like, pre-type-kit doing web development way back when, and I was doing did web development for about 8 years. I had a little kind of shop and did some build out of websites, web apps way back in the day, and then kind of transitioned more into digital marketing. But I've always loved building things, and I think that was kind of the ultimate ability that was enabled through working as a developer in my early career. And as I took on more ownership of kind of growing that business and trying to find more clients and doing more business development and kind of stepping away from actively building, I found myself kind of in the world of product and marketing and trying to figure out like what was I really building and for whom? How do I package it as a product?
Mhm.
And ultimately, how do I get people interested and excited around what it is that I was building? Um,
Yeah.
and so I've been kind of on that marketing train now for almost 20 years in various capacities. And I've got a relatively untraditional career path, like I was telling you earlier. I
Yeah.
But I think the thing that's kind of tied all that together between, being in marketing and product marketing and digital and comms and product strategy is there's like three things that have always motivated me. Kind of a love for storytelling and kind of world building, right? It's less of a boring term, I guess, than brand building, but it's still building brand.
Yeah.
And then wanting to work on problems that I personally care about, and that help shape kind of great human stories at the end of the
Hmm.
day. Um, and then lastly, kind of working with amazing teams, right? So an interesting problem space and working with amazing teams seems to kind of like primarily motivate me. I'm not married to one industry. I don't
Yeah.
geek out on everything. Everything's AI now, of course. So of course I'm spending a lot of time in AI, but it is an interesting problem space. There's a lot to kind of uncover there and figure out how to
Mhm.
apply. And then there's a lot of great people that are out there to work with. So if I can find that kind of, you know, kind of triad
Balance.
of a great story to tell and wonderful people and an interesting problem
Mhm.
space, that's where you'll find me.
Yeah,
Um,
that's amazing. You've
yeah.
you've mostly like recently been within like the developer spaces, the dev tool spaces. How has storytelling been important to that? Have you had to use a lot of that?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, one of the things that we're doing more and more of is like marketers, right? Is trying to
Hmm.
tell the stories of the people using the tools, services, products, and talking less about ourselves. So we're trying to
Yeah.
tell, their stories through our channels and through even their channels. And I think that's where,
Hmm.
um, that's where the storytelling aspect really comes into play. And I think what's becomes increasingly interesting as you age as a marketer is connecting with more people and getting to hear their stories. And so it's kind of a natural fit in terms of, product marketing or comms is just trying to figure out, well, what is the story that we want to tell, that they have to
Yeah.
tell, and then how do we amplify that? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, storytelling is critically important, especially as you've got new tools and platforms, and um, people need to know how they're being used and what value is being derived from them. And there's great
Hmm.
stories. Again, there's human stories to be told
Yeah.
about what people are building beyond like a code snippet or beyond a website. There's usually a driver or purpose behind that. It's always a human story. So that's always fun to tell.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's a great way to put it. I think also stories make you feel some type of way, right? Like a great story makes you feel sad or elated or really happy or even more curious, right?
Yeah.
And those are very strong emotions that you feel. So being able to tell those stories, yeah, that's always going to be important. I must
Right.
imagine. And doesn't matter if it's in a traditional marketing setting or with developers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's always something a layer deeper, right? I mean, one of the more interesting things that I've discovered working, for so long with developers and other folks is, developers in particular, I'll say we, because I used to be one. I still kind of dabble in development, but at the end of the day, you're really driven by trying to build something or by trying to solve a problem. And there's a lot of kind of natural curiosity that underpins your motivation. And
Hmm.
beyond that curiosity, there's always a really interesting story that kind of comes out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, building and storytelling just kind of go hand in hand, and um,
Hmm.
try to be as like you know unvarnished and real as we can be as we tell these stories. Because I know that you know um, for a lot of folk, especially in kind of technical folk, marketer or marketing is kind of I have like an allergy to it, or it's like a dirty word, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
no. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you either had an experience with somebody that just didn't understand the space, didn't understand the audience, um, and you created some conflict there, or they just weren't set up to succeed, right? They just weren't given the tools they needed to engage and do the job they needed to do. So I think that is increasingly important when it comes to something like storytelling. Is you've got to be given the tools
Hmm.
the knowledge, right, to tell the right story or to tell the story that is most impactful with the
Yeah.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. You did talk about marketing being allergic or an allergy to
Yeah.
developers and technical audiences. But then there is I would call it like a developing field of developer marketing,
Yeah.
right? There's been like technical marketing, product marketing, but then there's developer marketing, so marketing for developers. Well, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you see as developer marketing. I believe while you were, leading marketing organization at Netlify, for instance, you were basically like a chief developer marketing officer within this context. So, from experience, what do you see as developer marketing? How would you? There's a definition for it. You can
Yeah. I
help me with
mean,
it. What would it be?
nuanced for sure, right? I mean, in terms of how
Yeah.
you think about it. And I think there's a there's this generalization that can happen around marketing, which is, you know, here's my playbook. And I've heard this a lot, like playbook. Here's the playbook I'm going to use. Here's the playbook I'm going to use. And I'd like to think of it more as like frameworks because they're a little more fluid and they kind of evolve a little bit more. Playbook feels more rigid. But, you know, developer marketing is very, very different than marketing to like a sales audience or a marketing audience itself. You're selling like, you know, marketing technology and you're selling to a marketing audience. It's a very different approach in terms of um, how you talk about your offering and how you obviously position it. But you know, with developers in particular, I think what you need to be really clear about is the fact that it's not traditional marketing in any way, shape, or form. It is value-driven marketing, right? So leading with a really clear and compelling narrative that's rooted inherently in value, meaning I've built a tool or solution that I think fundamentally you'll get benefit and enjoyment from in terms of addressing a pain point that you know, and therefore I'm going to do a lot more showing than telling. I'm going to bring you into it with as little friction as possible, so that you can actually put it to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to try and do my best to make things that don't seem like marketing tools like docs or community or how-to content or, you know, meetups feel
Yeah.
like the most useful tools that they can be for you, because at the end of the day it's all about making you more productive and kind of unlocking your ability to build and be creative. And so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel, it shouldn't feel like marketing in the traditional sense, right? Um, it's still executed from the standpoint of trying to be consistent with your message, trying to be present in a way that developers feel seen and heard. And in many ways, that is a thread of, you know, marketing more generally that still exists, but it's much more about the developer. It's much more about the community than it is about
Yeah.
you. Like you kind of realize your brand and you realize your marketing goals and all of that by enabling and supporting the community and putting the community first and not really yourself. And in that way, it's, you know, it's different than I think a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
would think about traditional marketing or even a traditional marketer who's out there trying to build, you know, the brand first or kind of putting themselves first. And yes,
Yeah.
things like banners and billboards and all of that, those are still relevant. Like you still want to try and stay top of mind. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not going to lead with like a fluffy message or a big, um, you know, like a big campaign or something like that. You're going to lead with how can I do something the most helpful, the most valuable, the most kind of enabling for my
Mm-hmm.
user base, for my community, before anything else. And that's, you know, that's kind of like
Yeah.
the foundation of good developer marketing. It's really putting the
Mm-hmm.
community first.
Yeah. I can. I think that's pretty accurate. Thanks. Thanks for putting it that way. And I would look back to like the earliest forms of developer marketing. I think it was this guy at, was it Microsoft? Balmer. Yeah.
Oh, Steve
The
Ballmer.
dude,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah.
stands like on stage. He was like the first developer advocate to like be a
Yeah.
developer evangelist. And he talks about not the product, but how useful it is. And
Yeah.
he's addressing like a technical audience. And since then, I think we've also cultivated a culture of doing a lot of like demos and showing how useful stuff is.
Yeah.
Leading with like a demo first, product launches being, so here's how this would be helpful, not here's why our brand is great or
Right.
why we're the best. So yeah, that's pretty, like I haven't thought about it that way, like at least boiled it down to some of the entities that make it developer driven aside from creating content. But then I see why videos, like video demos for instance, are a huge part of developer marketing, and they actually do resonate well with developers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, like brand is a brand is tough, right? Brand matters more than anything. But I think and not more than anything. I mean, the product is obviously the most important thing, but brand is really important in the sense that I think it gets kind of a bad rap because people think brand and they think, oh, logos and colors and, you know, kind of the dressing. And at the end of the day, the product and the experience and community are the most important thing.
Hmm.
But I think what a lot of people maybe don't realize is like brand and brand experience, like what you're putting out in the world, how you want to be perceived, what the association is with what you've built in the eyes of your audience. That that's already being built from the moment that you have a first touch with them, right? From the moment they visit your website or the moment that you send them a
Hmm.
message, a DM, from the moment you know have them log into your app or sign up, like all those touch points are representative of the promise that you're making to those
Yeah.
users of how you want them to perceive you. And so it's important that you kind of take that into consideration. Are you helpful? Are you assertive? Are you no nonsense? Do you ignore your social channels when people reply to you? I mean, you know, all of those things help inform a perception of kind of what you stand for and
Yeah.
how valuable you see your community around you. And so you don't necessarily have to have a marketing team to build your brand, but it's helpful to
Mm.
have, you know, marketing either ensure alignment over time or help you scale or amplify that brand through new activities and channels. Um, but yeah, marketing is an amplifier, right? It's an amplifying force in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But your brand is there, whether you own it or the community perception owns it. I mean, like we go back and it was always like, well, now it's you're largely your brand is based on community perception. It's not something you own. It's right.
Yeah.
It's like what you put
Yeah.
out and how people perceive that. Um, but yeah, it's you know, it's
Yeah.
important. And I think, like I said, I think it's misunderstood often.
Yeah. I totally agree with you because I think about AWS, for
Yeah.
instance. I don't think I've ever seen like AWS marketing anything or talking
Right.
about their brand or trying to do like some like marketing or brand event. I mean, they have like marketing events for developers, like hackathons and like sponsored events. But everyone, there's a perception of AWS as it's reliable, it's cheap.
Mhm.
If you want to like be raw, you go to AWS, like bare
Yeah.
metal. You go
Yeah.
there. It's not going to be beautiful. It will just work, and that's
Just
it.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to be convenient as well. Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect one click deploys,
Yeah.
right? And that's sort of the brand. And I
It's
don't
sort
think
of
that's stated anywhere. It's just like our perception, and that's what we know AWS for. Is it's just going to be this rough gold that you could turn into something, and it's
yeah.
not going to be shiny.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think that was like preconceived because I would expect that whoever leads the marketing organization at AWS is like, yeah, so we're going to be this like raw, like if we were like if developers want to build something, we can give them like bare metal infrastructure, we can help them provision services, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
be easy. The
No.
interface will be as shitty as possible,
Yeah.
and
That's right.
and we just help them get stuff done. I don't think anyone ever said that. It just
No.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
You don't need to spend a lot of time. Yeah, you shouldn't have to spend a lot of time kind of architecting
Mhm.
that unless, you know, you've got something that you're using, like if you're using something within your branding to help differentiate you, or then you want to amplify that. But you know, for the most part, especially earlier on, that's not it's not
Yeah,
something that you need to overthink. You really just need to deliver. Um, you know, you need to think about how you're positioning your service in relation to things that are out there, and you need to double down on that and, you know, kind of work from a place of honoring that through all of
yeah,
your channels and all of your messaging, and that will organically kind of build the brand, right? It's action led brand building. It's not
mhm,
talking about who you are or talking about yourself. It's again, it's show before tell, and that's very very
yeah,
important in space.
yeah. Do you think teams like teams building developer products. For them, branding then is a sum of different parts of the organization. So from what they do in customer success, not just marketing, like marketing saying we're
Yeah.
going to build a brand, right? It's what customer success does. It's how product releases products, how they've built the product to be used. It's even like customer support, but more like external facing. Their documentation just gives you a sense of like a feel of the
Yeah.
company. Do you
Yeah.
think this is something teams should pay attention to at the start? Because then it shapes like perception, right? How
Yeah.
developers perceive the
Yeah.
product over the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of companies, so I've, way back when I was doing product development, and I was kind of a product manager, one of the beliefs that I kind of developed over the years was people can see through the quality and experience around your product how your team
Mhm.
operates or how your team thinks, right? So the quality of a product can often reflect the quality of how a team works together or how a team thinks. And so there's outliers to that, of course. Like you've got the solo developer or the solo, builder that's out there and does an amazing job polishing something, and you can think that a team of 12 people pulled it together, but it was one person. But for the most part, when a team is working really well together and um, is very open to and in tune with user feedback and what's happening around them in the market, like that shows really clearly in the product.
Mhm.
And as an example, if you were to sit on um, Twitter X all day long and listen to your developer community talking about your product and other products, and you listen really intently, um, and then that something shows up in a new feature or something that you're working on and you put it out there, that says tons about your team and how you operate and how you listen, and it's becomes reflective of your
Mhm.
kind of brand. I mean, it's kind of becomes synonymous with, yeah, this is a company that is a customer centric, that is a pillar of who they are and how they operate, and becomes synonymous with their brand and identity. um, Absolutely, how you operate and how that shows up uh, can inform that perception and of your product and your service, and trickles out. And a lot of companies you know um, are very kind of transparent, or even kind of uh, not vocal, but they'll leak like their onboarding materials, and like how
Mhm.
they operate and how they work as a team, for recruiting purposes, right? I mean, it's like not a mistake. They leak something out, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, now I
Yeah.
see how what this team values and what this organization values and how they operate, and that's something I want to be a part of. Therefore, I'm more inclined to apply, because it's
Yeah.
pretty hard to secure high quality talent too. So
Yeah.
um, the more you can show how you work and it reflects, that's good. It's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing,
Yeah.
assuming you work well, and you're you're,
Yeah.
you're well oiled.
Eh, Yeah, it is. It is a good thing. We have a question here from Ekemini. He
Yeah.
says, for startups building developer products, does developer marketing come in post-launch when there's an actual product to use, or it could start pre-launch, like building a waitlist? So when you start to think about developer marketing, right, as we know it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's always great to get input early on, and depending on how you want to launch and the kind of buzz you want to build, you can always consider building something, like a preview or a wait list or a teaser, um, to gain some kind of initial traction and interest. It's never it's never a bad idea, unless you're doing something super stealthy and you don't want to bring any attention to it. But even then, I don't think it hurts to tease anything. And then in terms of developer marketing in the kind of the traditional sense, it evolves, right? I think like everything in marketing, and I've spent a lot of time over the last like month and a half, 2 months, going deep on like AI applications and go to market and marketing specifically. and it's just changing so quickly. There's not really a right or wrong answer, quite honestly. Your developer marketing can start as soon or kind of late in the game as you want. But if developers are your primary audience, building something for them, I would suggest getting them involved as quickly as possible, especially on the community building front, right? Which I would argue is a form of developer marketing. I mean, getting your community enabled and engaged early on, even if it's a small group of pilot users or somebody involved in like an early beta, you can still get all those people into a Discord channel or a Slack channel or a private group somewhere and engage them early on and market to them. And then hopefully there's enough interest that just kind of snowballs. And what started as a channel of a dozen people who you're marketing to pre-launch becomes a channel of 500 people post-launch as you engage and kind of nurture them subsequently. So, yeah, I mean, developer marketing kind of exists alongside your whole life cycle. And that's the answer. Its form evolves a little bit, right? So you might start hitting up, YouTube and looking at like Hacker News and, working with different channels and kind of building that out after you launch. And as you start to get momentum, but start really intimate and focused on a handful of folks in more of a community setting to start. They help you build your product.
Yeah, thanks for that, Woody. So now I'm curious. When we talk about developer marketing and the strategy for it, we've talked about different pieces. You just talked about like channels, community. What are some essential components of a developer marketing strategy?
Yeah. I mean, the very first thing you have to just take into consideration is making sure that your message is really, really clear in terms of what you're offering and what you're working towards building. Or in the event that you're trying to, challenge something or a way of doing something, like what your kind of what your call to action is for that audience. And that's kind of the foundation for which you build, your programs or your engagement strategy. And I've seen it done ways where it's maybe a little bit more strategic in terms of how people kind of gate their engagement with the community or how they kind of reach. And when they have release milestones, then they'll kind of go out and they'll be more vocal. But in terms of getting there, you want to be really clear about what you're building and why anyone should care about it. Like that's the most important part. And I see a lot of organizations, especially startups, kind of get this wrong, where their message is still a little too little loose or a little fluffy. And it's in part because maybe they, are trying to figure out what exactly they're building, even though they've got some initial traction. But for the most part, that is the foundation of everything you'll do kind of downstream, is making sure that you're really, really kind of clear and crisp and concise on what exactly you've built and, ultimately who it's for and why they should care. And that follows through everything. And you don't want to muddy that. You don't want to make that murky, but that's foundational. Then, of course, having a product-led foundation, like PLG, product-led growth, especially in developer tooling, that's really important. And that's more of like just get in and play with it, get in and try it. Great onboarding, delivery of value as quickly as possible, offering sandboxes, free tiers, open APIs, making sure that the utility is available with as little friction as possible. That's really important. And, that is a go-to-market. That is a strategy, right? That is part of a kind of a marketing strategy.
I'm curious about PLG piece that you did mention, because I see a lot of developer tools that we understand developers typically, especially when the product is ultimately for a team or an organization. So it's more like B2B and B2C. They're very hesitant to start with a PLG growth motion, right? It's more like they want to reach engineering managers and ultimately maybe lead engineers and CTOs rather than individual engineers, because individual engineers aren't buyers. they're not really going to buy at best. They're probably champions or influencers in teams. How do you recommend teams navigate that? Get into the actual buyers? Do they still go with like a PLG motion? Do they have some sort of hybrid setup? But how do they go at this?
Yeah. So earlier on, PLG is just a good default because at the end of the day, you want people who are going to use your product or platform to be able to experience it in some way, even if it's a technical buyer, they're probably curious and they're probably poking around. They want to understand the ins and outs before they hand something to their team and say, this is what you're now going to use. So even if that developer is not a decision maker, but they might be a champion or a hand raiser, their buy-in and support and kind of advocacy of a solution is important. It's very rare that a team lead walks in and says, here's what we're going to use, and nobody on the team has heard of it or used it or been exposed to it. And even in the cases that does happen, rarely, they're going to ask someone on the team to check it out and kind of give them their thoughts on it too. So we want to remove as many of those gates and points of friction as possible. But in terms of reaching, decision makers, team leads, people like that, you think of like PLG and product-led growth as more of like a bottom-up motion. You also want to be thinking about kind of that top-down motion and trying to influence and, build advocacy for those folks that are trying to make the decision from a slightly different place, whether it be budget constraint or productivity goal or, trying to modernize a workflow, whatever the case may be. For those guys, you really want to try and reach them via thought leadership channels, industry events, trying to create FaceTime and opportunities to actually have a conversation with them. So in an ideal world, if you either are growing up or you're trying to target teams first, a hybrid motion really is kind of a winning strategy, at least something to work towards, right? Because to your point, you might have champions that are in there using the product and love it, but if the buyers aren't convinced, then you've got kind of a one-sided situation and it's not really going to go anywhere in terms of really driving revenue. But if you've got more of that top down, the buyers on board and they're interested in it, and then they roll it out and the team's not a fan or the team doesn't want to use it, then you have a retention issue and you're going to churn that customer, at the next cycle because no one on the team wanted to use it. So you really have to kind of, work both angles and make sure that you've got buy-in and alignment from both, your developers and your buyers.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Shooting for a hybrid motion. And the follow-up question to that is typically I also get this quite a lot, especially for teams that are looking to scale. So they have a Pareto split on their users and revenue generated, right? So the free tier users or the individual developers generate 20% of revenue for them, whereas 80% of revenue is generated by 20% of the users who are enterprise users and buyers.
Yeah.
So they're almost tempted to be like, you know what, we're going to shut off free tier. We're going to shut off individual users. How do you typically approach this?
Yeah, don't do it. You have to kind of, I know what you're going to ask. And I think, it can't be one or the other, unfortunately. It might seem like a good idea in the short term to prioritize the larger accounts and the enterprise buyers because their pockets tend to be deeper. But at the end of the day, even the people that sign up on the weekends, the people that want to explore your service, your offering, those can be potential buyers or part of a buying committee from a larger organization. And you really want to do everything you can to help influence them and kind of unlock, their influence by giving them access. So you may not want to focus your dollars or your efforts necessarily on the individual developers exclusively, but you absolutely want to maintain a DevRel presence or developer and community presence, and make sure that you're engaging with individuals and you're showing up for individuals, because you don't know who your next buyer is going to be or where they're going to come from or how they advance in their career. And what may be an individual 6 months ago is now a director and they have
Yeah.
purchasing authority in a
Mhm.
mid-market company. And so you really need to think about the individuals all the way up to the larger teams and buying groups, but you engage them a little differently, right? And so individuals, you're focused more on enablement, education, and getting them into the product. And then, of course, on like the organizational level, you're focusing more on trying to build influence for, authority and subject matter expertise within an industry, and why they should be considering you as part of
Mhm.
their stack,
Yeah.
for business, business growth, and to help accelerate where they need to go as a
Mhm.
company.
Yeah.
So it's not one or the other. And as you go up market, the weighting shifts a little bit, right? You focus a little bit more, you spend more of your budget trying to reach these decision makers. But um,
Never
yeah,
shut
it just
off.
it just kind of flips as you move up market, right?
Mhm.
You just allocate differently. That's all.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I've seen this personally play out, but at teams I've worked at in the past to companies that I'm close to
Yeah.
is at some point they reach a state where they're like, yeah, 80% of our revenue coming from a handful of users. Let's focus on those guys. But something that happens is their top of funnel dries up, right?
That's right.
So they find out, and because attribution is very difficult in like GTM and marketing, especially with developer marketing, it, they're unable to state why the top of funnel has dried up because there really isn't, uh, would I say, discernible pipeline or discernible funnel that have like measurable points in between. So they just know top of funnel has dried up. They're not winning as much enterprise deals as before, but they cannot somehow relate individual developer signups to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. The best scenario, right? So if you're a smaller organization and you're working directly with developers, as those organizations grow or as you go up market and you try and reach larger teams, the best situation you can find yourself in is one where someone on your sales team goes and talks to a prospective buyer, whether it be a CTO or a VP of engineering or somebody, and they are aware of your solution, and you're out there talking about their solution, and they go back to their team, as they should, not make a decision in a
Yeah.
vacuum. Go back to their team and say, hey, so I've been talking to so and so, and we're really thinking about bringing them on. What do you guys think? And the entire team, 90% of the team says they're amazing. I'm in their community. I play with their solution on the weekend. I just built this thing with their solution last weekend. That's the best case scenario. And if you walk away from that, or you
Yeah.
deprioritize it, and you create kind of a vacuum, those
Mhm.
developers will go somewhere else where they feel like there is a community and they are being heard, and the company
Yeah.
does have their best interests in mind. So yeah, you have to continue to invest in the individuals within and the community as part
Mhm.
of your motion. You really can't walk away from it.
Yeah. I definitely resonate with that. But a common rebuttal I get to this strategy when I share it with teams that are looking to make the switch, right? They're
Yeah.
confused. They're like, yeah, we have huge revenue goals. We cannot afford to support these individual free users. It's more a cost problem. They're like, our developers are having a hard time supporting like these free users because they demand a lot. Their infrastructure costs and requirements provision for free users. What, in your opinion, do you feel like is the best way to deal with this? Where the rebuttal is, it's just hard supporting these free users when we're not getting anything from them.
Well, it's an interesting time, um, with AI and everything that's happening around that right now. So there are a lot of clever ways to keep individuals engaged and get them in and using your product, using various forms of automation and different terms of service, um,
Mhm.
and getting them in front of the community more than tasking your own team and the costs that are associated with that. But the short answer to that would be, yeah, you might save some time and money now, but longer term, you're going to pay for it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's somewhat of a tough pill to swallow. You can do some optimization. You can think of ways to not limit, but you can think of ways to create different features and functionalities that make sense at that level, at the individual level, and give them a taste for what you're doing without creating additional complexity and oversight requirements for yourself, and not having to provision as much, and certainly not so manually. But at the end of the day, the more you try and kind of manage that or limit it, or even kind of walk away from it, the more it's going to come back to bite you longer term. Because to your point, William, the top of the funnel and that high level interest and engagement kind of goes with it. And unlike an other solution area or a different industry where you're focused on a slightly different audience, you can't really afford to like lock things up and gate access and create all these artificial barriers without a long-term impact. And I won't name necessarily specific companies, but there are a lot of companies out there that cater to developers that have done this for those same reasons. Oh, we want to move up market. We only want to deal with enterprise because that's where the dollars are. We don't want to focus on the individual. We're going to change all of our messaging to be enterprise focused, et cetera, et cetera. And not immediately necessarily, but within a year and a half to 2 years, they feel the impact of that. They will feel the impact of that, because all those internal advocates disappear from the buying committee.
Yeah, you're right. I also agree. I've seen this. 2 years, usually that's the time they come back, because that's usually the time between when I have the last conversation with them and when they decide to kick off another conversation is after 2
And you
years.
have to keep in mind too, like every few months there's a new solution that's going to try and pull them away. And if somebody's willing to talk to them, that's where they're going to go. And so it's like, okay.
That's right. Something I usually suggest to these folks when they're looking to make this suggestion, when they're looking to make these transition, and the risk involved is, I'm like, hey, a developer paying you, that's monetary value. But how else can you get value from them, right? These folks are internal champions. They use your product, but how can they become external champions, right? How can they talk about your product in places where no one's heard about your tool or your product before? That's marketing. That's free marketing from them. How do they build stuff? How do they start their own communities? How do they help you expand, right? How do they help you get to Australia, for instance, when you don't have like a salesperson there? These are some of the things that cost money. And if you decide to maybe hire like a head of expansion, that would cost you a lot. But if someone from your community that's super passionate about your product and they use it for free, they're not paying you, but they're open to, talking about your product in a meetup in the middle of nowhere, New Zealand. Right? That's marketing that you have and that you would pay top dollar for. So that's a way I usually encourage teams to think about it. But then they always come with the, we don't have the bandwidth to plan this and make this happen. Then I just realized, they're just hesitant. And it seems like they already decided to make the switch and they're just looking for some justification for it. So mentally, I'm like, I'll see you in 2 years. I'll just wait. I'll see you in 2 years, basically.
Yeah, I mean, community is like the big focus right now, right? I mean, in the last few years in particular, trying to build and foster community is, I mean, that's critical, right? That's going to be one of your best kind of assets in terms of being relatively low cost, in terms of being very effective, because you're basically creating ambassadors that will go out and speak highly of your brand. And sometimes they'll go out and do it on their, without even you having to say anything. They'll just go out and be like, I've been using this thing. It's fantastic. Or I
Yeah.
built this thing. And by the way, I use this service and it's great. Can't speak highly enough about these guys. They really look out for us and, have our best interests in mind. Yeah, it costs time. I mean, primarily it's time, right? That's what you're
Yeah.
investing in. It's not particularly expensive when it comes to spend. It's expensive in terms of your time. And so finding the right ways to engage, support, enable those folks within your community is going to be one of your highest ROI
Yeah.
strategies as you're trying to not only get started, but as you grow. And you don't worry about advertising or any of the other things that you think of when you think of like traditional marketing. Think of,
Hmm.
again, putting that community first and putting the people in the community first and really listening to them and participating with them. And
Yeah.
that's going to be that is going to be your go-to-market
Hmm.
when you get started.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. And I see we're coming up on time, but I have one more important question, which is,
Yeah.
in your opinion and from your experience, what's the biggest mistake you see teams make when they go to market for developers, and how do you help? How do you help them as head of marketing avoid those mistakes?
Yeah. I think the biggest mistake that I see time and time again is uh, going back to the lack of clarity around message. Um, it's really easy to get distracted by shiny objects. It's really easy to, you developers for building for developers, there's something that you kind of get excited about and you say, oh, I absolutely want to build this because I think everyone would love it. And you launch it and you kind of say, oh, here's this thing, and then no one uses it. And
Yeah.
you say, well, maybe it just wasn't the right thing. I'm going to go on to the next thing. I'm going to build that. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to making sure that your message is clear and aligned with kind of your vision, what you're trying, the impact that you're trying to have within the community, and looking at the message yourself and saying, is this guiding our work as well? I mean, are we staying true to this message? Are we delivering against this message? Are we straying too far from it? Or are we kind of going off the mark? So I would say at the end of the day, one of the most important things that aligns you, that aligns your product development efforts, that aligns and creates clarity for your community on what you're there to do is how you approach your message, or messages, I should say, if you've got more than
Yeah.
one thing going on. But it's the most important thing. It is your
Hmm.
headline, it is your banner. It's really easy to stray from that and chase shiny objects, or get off your kind of strategic path, because you're not entirely sure what that message is at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks. And how do you help them? How do you help these teams? Because I've seen a lot of teams that they're unsure what the message is. They're also distracted by like the product itself because the engineers
Yeah,
themselves, like you say, they're distracted by competitors, by the noise in the market,
yeah.
and they sort of need help with, you know, figuring out what this message is and clearly articulate it and sticking to it as well.
So there's a lot of noise, and every day there's more and more noise. I think, I mean, this is my philosophy, but in order to be a great marketer, especially when it comes to helping kind of serve a community, um, and this is where I think a lot of folks say they have like an allergy to the term marketing. There's a
Yeah,
perception that marketing is a lot of talking, and it's a lot of broadcasting, and it's a lot of BSing. I think great marketing, and in terms of how I go and help, is listening. It's sitting down and actually listening. Like, why is a team? Why is this team here? Why did they build this thing? Why did they build this other thing? Who is it for? Why should they care about it? You sit down and you kind of absorb all that as a sponge. And then the superpower of a great marketer is taking that and saying, what is the most important component that all of this boils down to help us articulate why we're here and why anyone should care? But that starts with listening. And so, I think that's the most important thing you can do. Just be quiet. Just listen.
yeah,
Like, get
yeah,
a sense. They're the people who have built the product, the service, the platform. They know more about it than you as a marketer, and they probably always will be because they are in there building it actively. And what you can do is soak up as much information as you can, understand the motivations for why something exists in the first place, listen intently, and then come back with, your recommendation, your plan of action, and then help execute on it. But yeah, man, listening is,
Yeah.
gosh, I wish people would just listen more in general. I get a lot of
Yeah.
flack because I'm on the quiet side. Like, Woody, you're not talking. I'm like, no, I'm just listening. I'm trying to understand because I don't want to
Yeah.
just jump to a conclusion and tell you this is what we're going to do. Oh yeah, we're going to run some paid advertising. We're going to go out
Mhm.
and hit this thing. No, that's a recipe for disaster. So just listening
Yeah.
intently and trying to make the most of that is what I would do.
Yeah. That is fantastic. Internally, I say to everyone on my team, before you put anything out, especially GTM wise, ask why should anyone give a shit about this?
Yeah,
Like brutally,
exactly.
why should anyone give a shit about this? It's beautiful, yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
It fits our brand, yeah, that's right. But why should anyone? And from asking a question, you first have to ask who is anyone,
yeah,
right? And from who is anyone, they're like, okay, so why should anyone care? What does anyone care about that would influence them and make them want to care about this thing we think is cool? And so
yeah.
far, I think it's great. We've had to like change stuff that we think is beautiful, but it doesn't really communicate stuff. Like no one would give a shit about it,
It's
basically.
it's it's the why. Yeah, why should they give a shit is a
Mhm.
very, very important question. And more
Yeah,
often than not, what it can do is expose whether or not you're actually listening to your audience, whether you're listening to your users. And a lot of teams don't, oddly enough. They
yeah,
build things because they think that somebody will like
yeah,
this. Oh, this is this persona. They'll love this. Well, have you spoken to them? No,
yeah.
but I know that they'll love it. Plus, I've looked up in Chat GPT that they'll love it. And it's like, yeah, okay. So going out and actually listening and trying to ascertain why anyone should give a shit,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, that's very, very important.
Yeah. And when you talked about having like personas and assuming that that's what your persona would like, we also fell into that trap. Personally, I did. For a
Yeah,
very long time, I was looking at ICPs, ideal customer profile,
yeah,
because that's what marketing or at least sales 101 tells you. You
yeah.
need to have an ICP, define a set of checklists, and everyone defines them, interestingly enough, before they've sold.
Hmm.
Most
Hmm.
teams, when they put up like a sales playbook, it's before you sell, you've defined like your ICP, your buyer persona, maybe some job to be done, but you haven't spoken to these people. You don't
Yeah,
even know if your ICP is your ICP.
that's right.
So I did have
Right.
ICPs. I reached out to them, radio silence. I got ghosted. People sending me messages on LinkedIn like, "Hey man, you're spamming me," even when I was trying to be helpful.
That's
So I
right.
realized there's an RCP, the real customer profile,
Yeah,
not the ideal customer profile. So the document where I like put down ICP, I haven't looked at it in like over a year.
that's
I've
right.
just been focusing on our real customer profile, and these are people that I first looked introspectively at our current customers
Yeah,
and why they came to us. Like, why did they give a shit about Hack Mama in the first place? Who are they? What do they care about? What would get them promoted? What are their short-term goals, long-term goals? I'm like, oh, no way. These are actually like this is what our real customer looks like,
yeah.
not
And
the ideal
surprise,
one.
it evolves over time. So what you might think
Yeah.
is like you've locked down and you've got like, oh yeah, this is going to do with it. That changes. Their needs change too, and who
Mhm.
is more interested. That there's some fluidity there. That all kind of
Yeah.
evolves. So you really need, to your point, you got to look at who's actually using the product, who's actually getting value, not who you want
Yeah.
to or who you think could. Because
Yeah.
I mean, more often than not, there's a lot of happy accidents in the world of tech in particular, where you build something for one purpose and then it turns out it's a much better product with a completely different audience over here. Look at Slack. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like
Yeah.
there's so many examples out there. So,
Yeah.
build for the use case, but go out and talk to people and figure out who's actually using it and if they're getting
Mhm.
value out of it. And,
Yeah.
and then, you build your message alignment and you run with it.
Yeah. That's great. I just clocked that we've gone like 10 minutes, 10 minutes over. This has been such a
Anyone
fun
for watching,
conversation, Woody.
thanks for hanging out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have Melissa in the comments is she's watching the 80-20 rule kill multiple companies. at
Oh
this
yeah.
time.
Hey, Melissa.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think both of you, Melissa and I used to work together back in the day, but yes, I've
Okay.
seen that. We've definitely seen that
Yeah.
quite a few places over the years. But yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Any last words on your end? How does anyone find you?
Oh, geez, I'm easy to find. I'm the only person named Woody Selick on LinkedIn. There's
Okay.
not that many Woodies out there, but yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn predominantly, and I am around. Not so much in the day to day, but I am around. You know, I'm on GitHub and all. But yeah,
Mhm.
find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn. I spend a lot
Yeah.
of kind of obscene amount of time on LinkedIn nowadays, so LinkedIn's a good place.
Yeah. Are you currently taking on like new like clients,
Yeah, yeah.
folks
So
that need advice?
yeah, I'm doing some advisory work, and I'm doing a little bit of fractional work. Doing a lot of work with, I mentioned earlier, just like working with a few AI startups. There are a lot, so it's kind of easy
Yeah.
to get involved. But yeah, I'm around, and I love meeting people and answering questions and trying to just be helpful. And I'm really passionate about kind of the marketing space and growth. And brand development in particular and product marketing. So if you have any questions or you just want to chat about anything that you or a company you're working on might be trying to navigate, I'm always happy to have a quick conversation. So just send me a DM on LinkedIn and be happy to help out if I can.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Woody.
Yeah,
And thanks
thank you.
to Kemini and Melissa for contributing as well. And that's today's episode of Everything Outside Code. And I'll see you all on the next one.
Sounds
Cheers.
good. Thank you.